There are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. That is reflective of the moment that we're living through right now. Part of the reason that there's so much anger in society is also because there's massive events, genocide in Gaza, war in Ukraine, huge conflicts everywhere, inflation, a pandemic, which we haven't even spoken about, which had everyone locked at home for a long period. And all of it is happening very close together, whilst at the same time, the rich are getting exponentially richer, people's conditions are getting much worse, and politicians, the ruling class, are coming out and they're saying, this is the best that we have on offer, and you've got to put up with it, and you've got to lower your expectations. I mean, Starmer's whole campaign has been, we're going to have tough choices, austerity is a bit necessary, and all of this kind of stuff. All of that happening all at once is producing convulsions in society. It can go in different directions. It can move in a right-wing direction when people are just desperate to try something out. You know, maybe I will vote for Trump, maybe I will vote for Farage, because they seem a bit different from what I've been given and what I'm being offered. And so it's really important that we don't offer just piecemeal reforms or just say, you know, we're going to try and make things a little bit better for you. We've got to say, no, we want to fundamentally transform everything that's on offer right now, because it is what's screwing you over. And I think that has been a mistake maybe sometimes that's been made in the past on the left, if we want to put it that way. A fear that if you go too far, you're going to scare people. I think right now the scariest possible thing is that we're not going far enough. What have we got in front of us? I mean, I think it was Rosa Luxemburg, she said, you know, socialism or barbarism, that's what's facing us. And that was true then, 100 years ago, but it's also true now. And I mean, even the whole planet is at risk of degeneration. And so let's go the whole way. I think that's important.
You should stand for Parliament.
Thanks.
Bravo.
Thanks.
So what should we talk about now? Fiona.
What should we talk about?
My mum was a communist.
Oh yeah?
Yes.
Very good.
And my dad.
Oh nice.
Yeah.
That's good. Let's talk about that.
My mum left the Communist Party, like most of them, in 1956 after the Russian invasion of Budapest.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people did.
You know, ever after that, our front room was the Labour Party committee room. So that was my upgrowing. Mind you, in 1956 I was already 13 years old, so it was about then. So I've no idea whether my mum was a member of the Communist Party when she made her famous speech to me about doing the right thing or not. You must have heard that, or okay, I won't tell you again then. So, but whatever. It's funny, the whole history of the writings and Marx and Lenin and and Trotsky and all of that.
Well, this year is Lenin's. It's 100 years since Lenin died.
Right.
And so I've been reading a lot about Lenin's life and his contributions. I think Lenin for me is the symbol of internationalism. That was something he was very big about. You can't fight, and I believe this today, you can't fight capitalism in one country. It's an international system. And he was also very interested. He wrote about anti-colonial struggles. I mean, I've read a lot about the Black movement in America and how it was linked up with the communist movement initially, but then a lot of them left in the 40s and the 50s because of Stalinism.
Yeah.
But that's something I've always been very interested in, is the link between the Black struggle and anti-capitalism and racism as a whole. For me, it's an anti-capitalist struggle.
Yeah.
So,
well, wasn't it fascinating that daft woman you had the conversation with?
We could talk for hours about capitalism, but I would just point out, you know, your trainers, your bracelet, everything you're wearing, the coffee you had this morning, the car you drove in.
Made by workers.
Was going on about how
I've
your
got
shoes are
trainers
the
on.
product of capitalism, and that your whole life is actually, you owe everything to capitalism, and that ethos is so obvious that it's marvellous and it works so well for everybody, and yet here you are, you know, being a silly little girl and pretending that cooperating with one another would be a better idea than trying to compete with one another and like make profits at all cost. And that they find it very hard to step to the one side and have a look at different systems. So it's fascinating that you are now probably going to get through to a whole new generation of young people who've never thought about any of this stuff.
I think for a whole generation of young people, they've no experience of capitalism being good for them, right? Whereas for maybe, there's always been inequality and poverty and, war, but it feels like right now it's becoming so extreme that for, a whole generation of people, the move towards an anti-capitalist, anti-establishment, anti-rich, people express it in different ways. They're not all going to use the same language. But that is a real defining mood of global politics. Here in Britain, for sure. But I would say all over the world, young people are trying to find ways to rage against what they're seeing and what they're experiencing. And that's not because a communist or someone's been there shouting about it. It's just the real world life experiences. And I think it is exciting, from my perspective, in terms of the potential that exists out there.
Do you think that part of it has to do with the fact that all the investigation of the genome, which was only 20 years ago or something, has finally come out, and people are just beginning to understand that race is a non-issue, actually. We're all African.
Yeah.
So we're all related, we're all distant cousins, and this whole colonial misconception about the supremacy of white Europeans is nonsense.
Yeah.
Except that it wasn't nonsense because they had big wooden boats and swords and guns and shit, and they could enslave you and steal everything you had. And so colonialism was always there happening, and everybody knew, but somehow they managed to convince their populations at home that this was all good and it was good for them. And it doesn't matter if you were 6 years old and you had to work as a chimney sweep until you died of consumption, which you did at a very young age.
Yeah.
Because it's not healthy being up a chimney all day, every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's like all of racism is divide and rule, right? And that's been the method of the ruling class, and they perfected it, they learnt it, the British Empire, they learnt it first in Ireland. I mean, me as well, I think my mum is Irish and my dad is Ugandan, and I used to, look at colonialism, what that did in Uganda, what it did in Ireland, but also what my family in Ireland are from the north, they're from a Catholic family in the north of Ireland. And I had this real moment in looking at that struggle, the rights of Catholics, against the discrimination that they were facing, against people that looked exactly the same as them, actually. But then also another idea of racism, which is, about, as you say, there's this artificial separation between what people look like. And I think actually it's the combination of my mum's experience and my dad's experience that's allowed me to look at it as a broader systemic and economic question,
Right.
rather than, as you say, that they invested so much in, false scientific ideas that there's differences between races, and that's been proven to be completely
Eugenics.
false. Yeah, the whole thing. And then now you've got people like Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak. Actually, the worst architects of racist policies are brown or black or, have heritage that is from different countries. And it shatters the idea that it is about what you look like or the colour of your skin. And it makes it very clear that why did Suella Braverman do everything she did? It's because she's more interested in defending her class interests than her national or racial interests. And I think that's inadvertently very useful, because it means that we can build a movement against that is united and is not kind of segregated or, doesn't go down different lines, but is actually getting to the heart of the matter, which is those policies screw over everyone, whether you're brown or black or white. It expresses itself in different ways. We can't ignore that. But I think that, the fact that they've got all these faces promoting all these racist policies has shown it for what it is, which is about the system as a whole rather than a kind of interpersonal problem that racism is.
It's interesting, though, that to think Suella, is that her name?
Yep. Or
And
Cruella.
And Sunak.
Cruella.
Is this a peculiarly English thing? Because I'm thinking about America, and there are very few brown faces but though there are some now in American politics.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, often Republican, reacting in some. But yeah, they are just showing that I am now allowed to be part of the other team. Yeah. So if I want to espouse neoliberal capitalist policies, I will be welcomed into that club by a few of them, not by all of them, obviously, because they still use the white supremacist colonialist ideas to maintain the idea of they're different from us. But they're using it more now against Russians and Chinese than against potentially rebellious slaves, which is what they always used to use it for. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So do you think we stand a chance, or you, certainly successive generations, stand a chance of cracking this nut?
I think so.
And arriving at the idea that we need to cooperate one with another if the world is to survive?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're living through a massive turning point. I think that the way people are viewing, faith in the system as a whole, like if you look at polls in terms of how much people trust the media, how much they trust political parties, how much they trust politicians, full stop, it is just catastrophically low. It's at its lowest point. And even in this general election, there's been a lot of predictions about a low voter turnout, which I think is so interesting because it's not a reflection of apathy. I've never known a time, I haven't been around that long, but in all of my time, I've never known people to be more political and more angry and more wanting to talk about politics, but they can just see through that this election is almost a bit of a pantomime, right, from the point of view of a real choice or democracy or what they have on offer. Right. And so I think that from day one of a Labour government, which we can expect in some form, although of course, we'll try our best to get as many independents in there. But from day one of a Labour government, there's going to be anger towards them. They'll have no honeymoon period whatsoever. And people they already feel betrayal from Starmer and the Labour Party. And then it's just going to be more exaggerated. And it's not just through electoral politics that I think this fight back will happen. You'll have strikes, you'll have mass protests. And I think that all of this can be the basis of a more fundamental fight back, a more fundamental change. This will be a crisis Labour government. I keep thinking, what's Starmer going to do? If Trump wins in America and you had Starmer in Britain, is he going to stand up to try? No, he's going to follow along with whatever Trump wants to do.
Just like he's always done.
Just like, yeah, and British foreign policy will be whatever America's foreign policy is. There'll be no vote or chance to express what we think about the ongoing situation in Gaza or Ukraine or anywhere else. I think that the mainstream political parties and the establishment and the media don't realise that they're sitting on a powder keg in society right now, and it's gonna lurch itself out in different ways. And obviously, what I want to do is connect with that in an organised way and say this is what we should organise around, and this is the way forward. And that's why I'm running also in the election, is to promote those ideas as much as possible. Talk about the 4th of July, yeah, but also the 5th of July. I'm almost more interested in what we do afterwards, because there will be a right-wing Labour government of some kind in power, and it can't any election is just a snapshot of a mood at one time. Yeah. There's more beyond that, and I do really believe that young people, especially now, are yearning for something different, and it could be pushed in quite a radical direction. The question is whether or not they see something visible and viable enough to join, which ultimately I suppose is what I'm trying to do.
Let's talk about what it is that they're looking for. I can't remember exactly what you call yourself, but I think I'm thinking like revolutionary communist.
Yeah.
Which is noble. but there is a but involved to it, which is that it's a big target as well. The noun revolutionary communist is like, there's so much ingrained in people. Oh my God, they're going to lock us all up in you know, in archipelagos. No, that just means a chain of islands, doesn't it? Gulags.
Gulags, yeah, that's it.
Not archipelago. Archipelago sounds like a big ice cream, doesn't it? Would you
I
like
wasn't
another
sure when you said
archipelago?
that. I was
Thank
like,
you
oh.
so much. But anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's interesting that, because I saw you say that to her herself when she was sitting there trying to be like kind of polite and but merciless.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I
what's
think,
your answer to that question?
I think that part of the reason why, I say I'm a revolutionary communist, and it's because I think people aren't interested in the idea of just tinkering around the system or small reforms. I mean, even Starmer's called himself a socialist. I think even the term socialist to some people is associated with a weaker form of politics or reformism.
Yeah.
And people want revolution. They want something fundamentally different to what's on offer.
Right.
And there are polls that show people even reaching towards Marxist ideas and communist ideas. Now, that doesn't mean that all of those people know exactly what that means or think the exact thing that I think when I talk about communism. And for me, it is genuine workers' democracy, an economy that's planned on the base of need and not profit. Nothing to do with the Stalinist regimes at all. That's not what I'm fighting for.
But if you had your druthers, would whatever it is that you're working towards happening in the future, it would presumably have the backing of the unions behind it?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, and aren't unions a small embryonic example of what genuine workers' democracy or agency of your life should be?
Right.
I think in a small form, a strike is a mini revolution in and of itself, because it's a time in which workers or people are able to try and take direct control over their life. If you think about what is the most important thing that determines how you live, it's your wage, right? That's going to determine your house, the access you have to school, your health, everything that you have in life is, and you've got no say over that. So when people go on strike over their wages and they're able to, that in and of itself, that process is incredible. It's a mini revolution, and I think that, that is action I think that a Labour government's going to face and that I would want to promote as much as possible.
That obviously is what's wrong with the Labour Party now, is that they no longer represented even the idea that bargaining with the power of your Labour is allowable and good. They along with the ruling class, they've been trying to stamp out that kind of social bargaining power of working people. That's always been a real contradiction in terms in the way that kind of politics, and of course in America they became the labor unions were infiltrated and taken over by organized crime and blah blah and all of that thing. And plus for many years as well, if you were in a union, you stood a good chance of being clubbed to death or shot dead, because the ruling class was so against it. And so there's the whole tradition of the Pinkerton men and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that's another subject. Well, I'm so happy to hear that you think there's light at the end of this tunnel.
Absolutely. A fire is coming, but in a positive way. Not that it's going to burn us down, but it's going to burn their system down. That's what I'm looking towards. And I just think that what I'm really interested in is the perspectives, like the long view of what's coming our way, which is a storm, right? Which is, and it's not even just about Stratford and Bow or London or Britain. It's about the whole world right now. And I think I read somewhere that like 50% of the world's population is voting this year because there's so many big elections.
Yeah, I read that
America, too. India obviously had their election, and all of that is this moment of instability actually for the ruling class. And I'm not saying that electoral politics doesn't define everything by any means, but there are moments in which you can rally around and try and get your ideas out there. I mean, also in terms of the youth, I think I saw another poll yesterday that showed only 8% of 18 to 24-year-olds would vote Tory in this election. And that seems obvious to us.
Only 8% of
18 to 24-year-olds
okay.
will vote Tory. And that might seem obvious to me or to us, but that is quite significant, is that they've completely lost the youth. And I think our ideas or my ideas or radical ideas, and even then, I mean, they'll call me extremist, but I think what's much more extreme is what's being put on a plate in front of young people today, which is no real future, climate chaos.
You're telling me that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and if the young people can get organised, they can make they can organise ways that makes a much more cooperative society, which will do much better for everybody. Everybody will benefit.
Yeah.
For instance, we could finally get rid of our Trident submarines.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, I was marching from Aldermaston to Trafalgar Square in 1959.
Yeah. Yeah.
To get rid of that rubbish.
Something like £200 billion that they would have to spend.
It's just insane,
the whole...
obviously.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you're wearing that, beautiful pale blue and yellow, whatever it is. And we know this has nothing to do with you supporting the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
But many people are, and they are deluded, obviously. It was quite clear from the very early 2000s, and certainly since Munich in 2006, when Putin made the speech about, come on, let's all get together and sort out security in Eastern Europe, because we have to, because this is getting weird.
Yeah.
Because of all the broken promises and so on. But it's got so weird now that it's unbearably dangerous, and that it's quite likely that we're heading for a nuclear conflagration. And when that happens, everybody will wake up that morning and go, how did that happen? Well, it happened because you didn't bloody well vote, or you didn't stand up and go, no.
Yeah.
This is because people aren't. Luckily, people are taking to the streets and going, we have to stop murdering our brothers and sisters in Palestine. That's number one on the list. Israel is a failed experiment. They have shown us that they are not fit to be a state. So what's going to happen? Obviously, it has to be a single big democratic nation, equal rights for everybody from the river to the sea, end of conversation. We don't have to talk about that anymore because it's obvious.
Yes.
But this, about how young people think in the United Kingdom, it is amazing.
And we have to expose it as well. I mean, with Ukraine, for example, the money that has been sent to Ukraine, which is to effectively fund a war against Russia without voting on it in Parliament, without discussing it, and then the same is true, obviously, against the Palestinians, to give money, to give weapons to Israel, to commit war crimes against them. And there's no democracy. And I think that this morning I was in Stratford I was having a conversation with an organisation. They're a migrant and refugee centre, and we were talking about, the horrific red tape that exists for refugees and for migrants, and the comparison with the Ukrainian scheme that they set up for refugees coming from Ukraine, which they did very, very quickly. And I remember at the time, if you went to airports, you go to Heathrow and there'd be a big sign in Ukrainian, welcoming Ukraine. Great, that's a good scheme, great. But it shows they could do it and they can do it. And the resources exist for all of this stuff, but it's in the wrong hands, right? And that's why it's really important to connect these things with the system as a whole and expose it for what it is. I mean, it's a lie to say we don't have enough money for housing or healthcare, or we don't have enough materials to house people, or whatever it is. We know that it's there, and a big part of my campaign has been to say they're lying when they say all of this. And what I'm fighting for is also not just taking a little bit of money, just tax them a little bit more. So let's seize their wealth and let's use it for what we actually need. And I think that's the other thing about this campaign and connecting with young people is people want to go the whole way, because it's also like, what have I got to lose? I think that's the other message that connects with people is they can see there's a lot of nervousness in society, maybe anxiety about, job prospects. How am I going to buy a house? How am I going to have a family?
Well,
how can I have kids? Yeah.
That's the answer.
And at a certain point, historically, you can see that when you study all, the rise and fall of different, societies, civilizations, empires. At a certain point, people are pushed where they've got nothing left to lose, and they fight back.
The problem is that some of them will be pushing the people who've got nothing left to lose to join the brown shirts.
True.
There are fascist movements
Yeah.
developing. So, you know, like the League of Empire Loyalists from my youth is beginning to come back. And so you have a Farage on there standing in the wings waiting to take over when people lose all hope of the possibility of a future that has empathy and love and truth in it, and just say, oh, screw all that, we'll just stamp on anybody else and grab what we can. So it's a sort of lawless world that only ends up in wars, more wars. Well, we've already got perpetual war going on because we follow the example of the United States of America. And that's just a way, obviously, of taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich. That's what war is for. That's what it's for. It's not to spread democracy or anything, as you quite rightly point out. Well, I hope you bloody well win.
Thanks, me too.
Stratford and Bow. There's another, I have to ask you this, isn't it? There's another independent, isn't there?
There's a few other independents.
See, that's a bummer.
Also running, yeah.
Why aren't only you standing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think,
it's
in
not.
this
He's
process,
Ilford,
that's
isn't he?
yeah, it's against, she's called Uma Kamara and is the Labour candidate, but it's a brand new constituency.
Right.
And so I think that's why, I don't know, there's a lot of people that want to fight back against the Labour Party and Tories, which is a good thing, of course. It would be better if it was only one person, but that's the way it's gone this time around.
That's the way it's going to be.
But I think either way, it's what will happen out of this election, I think, is hopefully a growing layer, a growing movement of people who can see the same policies from the Labour Party and the Tories, who can see that there's a need for something decisively different from what's on offer. I mean, what you said about growing fascist movements is absolutely right. When there's an anti-establishment mood, that can go in different directions.
Yeah.
Trump took advantage of that. Bolsonaro took advantage of that. There's a whole layer of politicians and parties and movements who can tap. I mean, Farage takes advantage of that. People are desperate for someone to say, yeah, I know your life is terrible and I'm going to fundamentally change it. These are the problems. What we have to do is be bigger and better at getting our message across to those people.
It's always foreigners, though.
And
or communists.
Yeah.
Or homosexuals.
Yeah.
Or gypsies.
They'll find anyone.
It's the German model, and it's always Lebensraum in some weird way or other. So that's what we have to really guard against. And I know this is, and it's all really obvious, but I cannot imagine how depressing the future must look to many, many young people who think, what? Is the only thing I can do is look at funny videos on TikTok about animals? You know?
I think we should say to those people, there are these horrific ideas in society, oppressive, racist, homophobic, all of these, and it feels like there's a rise of these ideas, and that can seem really overwhelming. I would say ideas don't come from nowhere. They don't just randomly appear in society. They're rooted in something material. And I would say today those horrific ideas are rooted in an economic system that is desperately trying to maintain itself. And so there's an ideological struggle, absolutely, against those oppressive ideas, but it has to be rooted with an alternative system that we're offering, in which there wouldn't be a breeding ground for those ideas. It's like artificial scarcity, and that there's not enough housing and there's not enough jobs is how they say, and these are why migrants are a threat to you, because they're going to take your house and they're going to take your job. And we've got to say, first of all, that's not true. Those people are suffering a really horrific existence. But in any case, there is enough housing and there is enough jobs if we reorganise the economy and we planned it properly. And I think you've got to make the two arguments at the same time. There's an ideological struggle, but that's also rooted in an economic struggle. And I think that's good because it's not just the battle of ideas, although that plays a massive role. It's also the battle for production, for ownership. A big thing I've been saying in my campaign is, we've got war criminals to bring down, but also we have a world to win. We have something to fight for, which is positive, and I think that's really important.
It is really important.
Yeah.
Obviously. I mean, well, more power to you.
Thanks.
There's a lot to dismantle.
Yes.
Because I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
My whole life I've watched the capitalist system since the Second World War, when I started noticing things, sort of vaguely. I was 2 when it finished, but I started looking
You beat
up.
me.
But you know, I watched the brave. I actually made an album in 1982. It's called The Final Cut. It was the last record I made with Pink Floyd, and it's a requiem for the post-war dream is the subtitle to it, and it's all about the destruction of the welfare state by the United States of America and its proxies in this country. So that Thatcher mainly. Thatcher followed by Blair, who's Margaret Thatcher in a, you know, he's
different
taken off the
face.
frock and put on a pair of trousers.
Yeah.
But they're the same person, which is just the pragmatists do anything, absolutely anything for power and to keep the ruling of the country in the hands of the ruling class and never let it get anywhere near the electorate. Right?
Yeah.
So that's why you in Stratford and Bow and Andrew Feinstein in
Yes.
Holborn and St Pancras and Leanne in Ilford North, you are creating small islands of actual real democracy in this tiny island, and you're giving the electorate actually something to vote for that could make a fundamental difference to their lives, because they will be part of something that is revolutionary and that it is resisting the system that keeps us enslaved and keeps us in perpetual warfare and all the rest of it. So good on you.
Thanks so much.
And good luck.
Appreciate that.
I mean, I should be watching very, very closely. And I might even have to come to Stratford and Bow.
Absolutely, yeah, I'd love that. That would be great.
All right.
Okay.
Well, it's lovely to talk to you
Yes,
today.
thank you.
How encouraging, wasn't it? I mean, I'm blown away by what I've heard today. And so I hope you are too. Get out there on July the 4th and vote for these candidates so we can make a change in this country. And if you can, if you've got any pocket money left, support Double Down News through Patreon.